Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm here at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. We talked to a lot of the players today, and what we learned is the Steelers are looking hard at this defensive tackle class. But does that mean they're going in the first round, second round, third round? We'll talk about that versus the wide receiver need. We got Daniel Jeremiah clips here, but we've got Nick Farabaugh to break it all down with me. We'll talk about DTs, wide receivers, linebackers, all in the NFL draft, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And a reminder, the Locked On Steelers podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcasting network in the world. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh from PennLive.com. We love having Nick on the show here. Nick, we got to talk to off-ball linebackers, D tackles, and edge rushers. We're recording this on Wednesday, so we did this on Wednesday. This is the Thursday episode. But I want to talk about D tackles first because when we went through D tackles, one thing that was clear when we started asking, like, hey, who's talked to who? We noted that the Steelers had formal interviews with at least Clemson D tackle Peter Woods, who some people has as the best defensive tackle in the class, Ohio State D tackle Kayden McDonald, who some other people have him as the best defensive tackle in the class, Lee Hunter, defensive tackle out of Texas Tech, and Darrell Jaxon, defensive tackle out of Florida State, and several informal with several other defensive tackle prospects. Nick, it's an early part of the process, and the Steelers got to make their rounds. But does it seem to you like maybe there's a bit more of an emphasis on D tackle than people realize?
I mean, okay, what did you expect out of the defensive tackle? Here's the thing. I think everyone naturally looks and says, hey, they drafted Derrick Harmon and Y.A. Black last year. You don't necessarily need an emphasis on it. But then you look, Cam's still not getting any younger.
Yep.
And beyond Y.A. Black, who is there? Like, there's no one. And they need to still find Cam's successor. Keanu's going into a contract year even. Like, do they have a decision to make on Keanu Benton? Is he going to be extended long term? I don't know. I think that's going to be something. So, no, I'm not surprised by this emphasis on defensive tackle. They need depth. They need guys that can maybe be high-end talents. Now, I'm not sure they're going to select one in the first round. I think that certainly it is a possibility, and I think that they're projecting for that. They need to do as much work on these guys as possible. But I do look at the defensive tackle class, and it's pretty solid. Like a lot of those names you mentioned, they're very different players from one another too. No one archetype. The one guy you didn't mention was Caleb Banks. Now, granted, I was with Caleb Banks, and I didn't get to ask him necessarily if he met with the Steelers, but would not be surprised if he was on that list as well. The Steelers did have exposure to him at the Senior Bowl, so they already have kind of built-in connection there with Caleb Banks, who was really good there. So we're talking about, to me, Caleb Banks being a guy that could also sneak up into that discussion. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by the emphasis on defensive tackle, man. There's just not enough talent in that room.
Agreed.
To be quite honest with you, and I appreciated, the efforts of Logan Lee, Azeze Otomewo, and others, but some of these guys were unplayable last year. Along the depth lines when, Harmon got hurt. Derrick Harmon is a very good player, but I'm not sure his injury alone should make your run defense collapse into being a bottom 5 unit. And that to me is definitely something to think about. So yeah, I'm not surprised because they need a youth movement there that needs to continue, and they need a lot of depth just for the now.
And I also wonder how much could be in looking for a defensive tackle is looking for a nose tackle, because Keanu Benton has not worked there too well. He's had his moments where he's shined here and there, but he's still an inconsistent nose, but he's still a productive interior presence, especially when he gets to play the 3 a little bit more. And we've seen that pop up. I wanted to get your thoughts on, are there guys in this class that you think could play nose, and if that should be something the Steelers should be looking at within the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys that can play nose. I think it's a good nose tackle class. I mean, some guy you didn't mention on that list, I think, is maybe the best pure run stuffer in the class is Big Citrus, Dom Orange, out of
Mm.
Iowa State. That's a guy that is a hoss kicker. He doesn't really offer much at all as a pass rusher, but you want to talk about a guy that can defend the run
He
and play
eats
at the nose.
blockers.
Right. You eat space. He's a guy. I mean, I think you look at McDonald. I think he fits into that very much. I don't always want to compare guys with the same helmet that they had in college, but McDonald definitely has Tyleek Williams vibes to him. And so there's a lot there, I think, that fits into that table. Listen, I think that the Steelers have finally come to an acknowledgement that they've been playing Keanu Benton out of position. I think that is – and maybe that's a new staff coming in with a new lens and realizing that. But Patrick Graham's going to play a lot more sub-package football. That's one of the things, when you had me on, when we talked about Patrick Graham, one of the things is nickel, dime. You're going to have a lot of different looks out of sub-package football. That means for Keanu Benton, it's not a lot of nose tackle movements. 1-tech, 3-tech. He's going to be able to be a penetrating 3-tech. And that's what he is, man. Like, if he went to a different defense, he would eat at 3-tech. And that's probably what he's going to be. And they really just need a nose tackle because, when Harmon got hurt, they kind of started to experiment a little bit with moving Keanu out. And then they had to try someone at the nose, and they just did not have a nose tackle that they could trust once Ekwale got hurt. And so that, I think, is really important. The other thing about the draft is, man, the free agent D-tackle class, woof. There are not a lot of good players. Like, there's like 2 guys in there that I'd be interested in for sure. Deshaun Hand from the Lions, cool run stuffer that's versatile, and then Tonga from the Patriots. I think he's a solid player. They're both a little older. I think Hand is going to be 30. Tonga is 30, but I think they are really steady hands that are real quality depth. And I think that's what the Steelers can do. If I were the Steelers, I'd also definitely scour the trade market. You talk about having, 12 picks, ship one of those late rounds out and get a legitimate depth piece there. But yeah, man, there's going to be definite, ability to get a nose tackle here. And you don't necessarily have to do it early. I think of other guys, down the board. The Minnesota kid. I can't even remember his name.
Devin Easter.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. There's a few spaces.
Informal meeting with the Steelers.
Yep. And that makes sense, right? That makes a lot of sense. There's another Iowa defensive lineman in this class too, by the way. If you wanted. Look, they've taken the last 2 of them, so I guess you got to put that in there. But so, yeah, there are a few space-eating guys that are legitimate options for the Steelers this year, at least in the draft.
Daniel Jeremiah addressed how nose tackle is coming back into form. And we talk about this a lot, right? There's cycles in the NFL. When offenses start to go one way, defenses go that way. And then when defenses go that way, offenses go another way. And so with the re-emphasis of the run game, because so many defenses are dropping into 2 shells, part of what needs to happen is you need to have guys up front that can eat multiple blockers and do that. You talked about Dom Orange. I asked him about that, and he said that's something that I prided myself on. And he said, and when I was there, he talked about how I ate blockers. There were games I'd have 1 tackle, but I made an impact. I was one of the best guys in the field because I was eating up blockers. And so I want everyone to get a chance. Daniel Jeremiah, my colleague, Ray Fittipaldo at the Post-Gazette asked this question. He actually wrote about this. Go check it out at post-gazette.com. He did a great job with this. But Daniel Jeremiah, he asked Jeremiah about nose tackle and its increasing importance. And I thought what Jeremiah said was important. Here was Daniel Jeremiah, NFL draft expert from the NFL Network.
Your GM, where's the value in taking a nose tackle? I know there's some good ones in this draft, but again, where's that value based on the way the game's played?
I think everything's come full circle. When I started scouting in 2003, it was, we can have, value in a player that's maybe a 2-down player. He's dominant against the run. He can anchor then against double teams, play a gap and a half. And then it went, okay, well, we're a passing league. And if you can't rush the passer from inside, you can't take that player in the first round, or you can't take him high. They don't carry the value. And now we've kind of come back where we've got all this shell coverage and 2 high safeties where you have to be able to stop the run with fewer bodies. So now that value is there. Now Seattle has cracked the code. They got 2 elite players in Murphy and Leonard Williams who can do both. They can hang in there, anchor a run, play 2 gaps, and then they can also rush the passer. They're going to have to pay a premium for those guys. But like in this draft, a player like McDonald, where I think most teams would say, in the heyday of the Chiefs offense, the Rams offense, like where that was going was like, well, you can't take him in the first round. He's going to be more of a run stuffer. I think now it's kind of maybe coming back to that type of a player having more value.
Daniel, what are your thoughts on the Steelers' needs and how should they address them?
The Steelers, they've done a good job with the offense and defensive line. They need some skill. So getting another receiver, finding a corner, I think they go after, focusing on bigs, I think they go little.
So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to address those things with you, Nick, because D tackle, nose tackle, we're going to bring up one of the D tackles we talked about and how excited he was to talk to the Steelers and talk about that need versus addressing the trenches again, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and going for those skill players. And we'll talk about this wide receiver class. All that's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you, this show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position that you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need to find the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. This episode is also brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, past schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule, 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. Recipes are simple but feel elevated, even restaurant quality with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. Saves time and money. Home Chef customers are saving an average of $86 per month on groceries for a limited time. Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off their first box, free shipping, free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter and Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, let's get back into what Daniel Jeremiah was talking about. And he said it's about coming full circle. I like the way he said that because, again, the cycle is something that I think is very much happening right now. And as much as you need interior pass rushers, especially to get after quarterbacks and make them uncomfortable, you need guys that are going to eat blocks and take on two offensive linemen and keep linebackers clean. It is becoming so important. I think it's something that Derrick Harmon did a really good job of in his first year. I think Y.A. Black showed flashes of it at times. He didn't always do it. But that's something that I think is really intriguing. And I want to ask you, Nick, when you look at this class, and it's precursory, we haven't seen guys test yet. We still have to study more tape, but is the better way, if you were to address that in this draft class, is that something that you prefer addressed in the first round or the second or the third round?
I prefer day two.
Okay.
Just to me personally, here's the thing. Okay, you can get a really high ceiling guy like Caleb Banks, who probably has more pass rush juice than run stuffing ability. And I mean, I'm not sure anyone's necessarily against getting a guy that has the juice pass rush wise, but you do have, Keanu Benton is that, right? He's the guy that is pass rush first, run defense second. Harmon's the opposite. And so it's kind of weird of how you maybe would offset that. But there's going to be enough guys, down the board. Now, I could say the same thing about wide receiver. There are going to be guys down the board. I could say the same thing about guard. Right now, where we stand, though, I just look at needs and I say, man, that wide receiver room is starving. It has been
Mhm.
starving. And
Mhm.
I think I really, the second part of DJ's answer, they have put so much into the trenches, offensive and
Mhm.
defensive. It's at some point you got to hit the perimeter, right? You got to invest in receiver, corner. Um, that's kind of where I'm coming in this offseason is it's time to strengthen those positions. Even if you don't fix them, you got to get them on the right track, right?
Invest in them.
Right, because O-line's on that right track. And sure, you still have guard and left tackle that aren't fully set. But, man, center to right tackle, I feel like you got all three pieces you're set on.
Right.
On the D-line, I feel like you have two legitimate guys are pieces long-term in Benton and Harmon. Like, I feel like you feel good about that. They've even invested in edge rusher. Herbig and Sawyer over the last, since Omar Khan became the GM. So the edge room looks amazing, right? They're so much so they have a glut of star edge rushers. Like, it's just strong in the trenches. That's where the Steelers are strong. And I just think at some point to create a really well-rounded good team, you need the perimeter players. And so that to me is something that they need. And so I would prefer to go with a perimeter player, I think, in the first round, but who knows how the board falls, right? You can get a board that looks like, hey, guard and DT are the best players available, and there's nothing against, especially with the Steelers are taking another trench player, if the value is right, obviously.
One of those guys could be Lee Hunter, defensive tackle out of Texas Tech. I have him 24th on my big board right now overall. We talked to him for a little bit. Here was Lee Hunter when I got to ask him some questions about his Senior Bowl week. I thought he had a great Senior Bowl week. And then his excitement to talk to the Steelers in this draft process. Lee Hunter from the NFL Combine
Lee,
podium.
you had a really strong week at the Senior Bowl. What was the biggest feedback that you got from the scout, from coaches who saw your work, and what's the biggest strength that you showed in your week there?
They just told me to keep working, just keep being you. Don't give up, don't stop now because you think you're almost there. Just trust the process.
What are you proud about most about your development? Like something that you're proud that you developed in your collegiate career that you worked really hard on.
I started as I got into college more. I started perfecting as a pass rusher, getting better at my pass rushing, and also watching film.
Have you met with the Steelers yet, formally or informally?
Yeah, I met with the Steelers.
What was that like?
It was amazing to meet with those guys. It's great people in there. I enjoy having a conversation with the Steelers.
So Lee Hunter, one of the guys in this draft class, the Steelers looked at again. They looked at several guys, but I think that this is the thing here, Nick. You look at this D tackle class and where guys are. I think we can kind of agree. Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, Lee Hunter, Kayden McDonald, maybe even Kristen Miller, all are guys that are looking at middle to late first round picks. But then a guy you mentioned, Dom Orange out of Iowa State, Darrell Jaxon out of Florida State. Those could be guys that maybe go on day two. And I think that's where I think it could be interesting to see what's the better value for the Steelers to get right now.
Yeah, and here's the thing about the argument, about value. The Steelers pick a 21, and this is a class that I don't think is going to have, 21 true first-round talents. And, the fact that there are 32 picks, first-round talents on your scale can vary, right? And it doesn't mean every player taken in the first round is first-round value. And when you pick a 21st overall, sometimes you get into this weird space where you're in between the time when most of the top guys of the crop get taken, and maybe it's a little too early for some of those guys. And so I don't think there's an appreciable difference, or there will be, in, say, wide receiver or a corner or D tackle or guard even. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference in value unless you get one of these guys to fall. And just to me, I do mocks and I kind of look at the boards, and it's a hard time seeing a blue chipper fall in this draft to me personally, in the specific class and how it's constructed. And so, that puts guys like Woods, Banks, McDonald, Hunter, all those guys in play, because how much do you like them, right? If you're taking a guy that's a 1-2 fringe, position matters maybe a little less, and how you like that player matters more, because you're probably splitting hairs rather than having an obvious BPA. I think the Steelers, in 24, they had an obvious best player available. Falatanu fell because of medicals. And remember, they were surprised he was there for them to take him. Well, that was an easy one. Harmon, another guy. I feel like that was an obvious BPA pick. I can't put my finger on who that would be this year. I don't think there's an obvious guy that says, man, that guy's going to fall potentially and be your BPA pick. Because, there's guys like Jordan Tyson who may have that medical question. But
that's what I was going to ask about.
But I don't think he falls all the way to 21, man. He's too talented. And listen, it's not like he's going to develop arthritis in his knee. I mean, he had a severe knee injury in 2022. He broke his collarbone in 24 and then basically messed his hamstrings up in 25. And that's not great to have that profile injury, but how much of it is just sheer bad luck? I mean, sometimes, man, like breaking your collarbone, I mean, that's not injury prone. That's just bad luck.
Bad luck.
So I just have a hard time seeing it. And there's so many receiver needy teams in the teens. That's the other thing. So I just have a hard time seeing him get down. I don't buy into this hype that, a Stunning Styles, Caleb Downs fall is going to happen. There's not enough top blue chip prospects in this class for that to happen to me. I would be surprised if either of them get out of the top 10. I don't see a blue chipper falling. I think the best scenario for the Steelers of a guy that is obviously a top 15 talent to me that could fall to 21 would be Vanga Ioane, the guard from Penn State. I think he's the type of guy that is a pretty obvious BPA. Just depends on how much you view the value of guard versus, another receiver. But there's going to be receivers there at 21. We're talking about the deep group of D tackles that might be there. I mean, there's still going to be, Denzel Boston and Casey Concepcion and Omar Cooper that you could take at 21. So there's going to be multiple options probably at all positions, and it just really depends how the Steelers like them when you parse through it.
I want to talk about that wide receiver class. In fact, I asked Daniel Jeremiah specifically about this wide receiver class, the strength and what traits he thinks are most important when looking at them. Here was Daniel Jeremiah when I was getting to ask him at the podium on Wednesday.
Daniel, wide receiver is a position that's people are always excited about. Yeah. What are the traits that you think are most important to this game when you're looking at classes, and what do you think of this class from strengths from top to bottom?
Yeah, there's again with the edge rushers and the receivers, I think there's all different flavors. And in terms of some teams are just shopping for different things, but when I look at wideouts and guys that have hit and been successful really over the last 7 or 8 years, I think some of the underrated components of it are guys who have play strength. They're really strong. They're strong with their hands through the catch. They're grounded through the catch. They run through the ball. They don't have to leave their feet and cradle the ball. Like you think about Puka Nacua is a great example of that. JSN's another great example of that. Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are not little spindly guys. These are strong, sturdy guys, and they're sturdy through the catch. They're sturdy after the catch. So that's become a big thing for me. And I also think even when you get into the postseason, we talk separation. Well, you play the better defenses, the better teams in the postseason. There's just not going to be a lot of separation. You're going to have to be a ball winner and someone who's physically strong. And then the other component is mentally sharp. You look at JSN came in with that reputation. Puka, who had some immediate success, came in with that reputation. T-Mac with the Panthers was an incredibly bright football guy. So I think those are some of the underrated components, not just how fast you run, how high you jump.
I think that's really interesting stuff from Daniel Jeremiah talking about this class and what teams are starting to value more. We're going to talk about that and talk about the linebackers that we got to talk to on Wednesday. All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel. If you ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll be able to enter for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience right there for you. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team you can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love future bets this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now, not only can you pick cash, but it can also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future bet and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter with Nick Farabaugh. Nick, getting back into what Daniel Jeremiah said about this wide receiver class and strong-handed wide receivers, bigger guys that can run. I kind of agree that's kind of becoming important because combat catches are so important. He kind of downplayed just getting separation. He's like, because he said, look at in these playoff games or in the big games when you're getting it going against those corners, it's the guys who are going to make the tough grabs in the big moments that are there. That kind of leans itself to guys that are more of the combat catchers. Carnell Tate, Makai Lemon, despite not being only 5'11", he's one of those guys. Denzel Boston can sure go up and get the football, and he had a lot of praise for Omar Cooper. I think Elijah Surratt puts himself there. I really like Malachi Field. I know he's not higher up on your list, but what do you see about this wide receiver class and the way that things are trending in the NFL about what's most important when going and getting that guy? Because like you said, this is a big need for the Steelers right now.
The toughest thing about what DJ said is, yes, all those are important, but you don't just want to find a ball winner. Because if it's only a ball winner, you get Keon Coleman. And that is danger of it. And I've seen a lot of guys that can't separate, but were ball winners or supposed ball winners that didn't work out. And I think of, these are going to be some names from the past because this is when I really started scouting. Guys like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, Colin Johnson, Seth Williams. These are going to be names that maybe some people don't remember, but they're like scouting lessons for me. And I think the right mix is who has enough wiggle to still separate enough. You don't have to separate a ton. Like, it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be you break the guy's ankles and you're wide open, right? It just needs to be, do you have that window there for that quarterback? That one-step window. Can you do that? You need a little wiggle. Can you separate through physicality at the top of your routes? Do you have the ability to win at the line of scrimmage, whether that's through physicality or through your hand usage and your footwork? All these things work. And just because you're 6'5" doesn't mean you don't have that wiggle or agility. I think a guy like Denzel Boston has had some trouble struggling, but I also admire his footwork at the line of scrimmage, and he gets people's hands off him. And certainly he's able to win through contact. And that's why I like Denzel Boston. He has tools at his disposal that appear to be getting better by the year. And so that to me is something to keep an eye on. You don't want to just get guys that are just pure contested catch guys. Just like, if you're scouting gadget players, gadget players are very much volatile players. Not all of them are Deebo Samuel, right? So that's another one to kind of be tough in. How do they run real routes? But you also, if the guy is a pure separator, can they win through contact? Can they win through press? Can they make the tough grabs? That was always the one shortcoming, I feel like, of Deontay Johnson. He was such a great route runner, but when push came to shove and he had to make the tough catch through contact, I don't know if we saw it enough, right? That was the one thing with him. And so there's all these things that you take up, and it's like parsing through it. But this class has a ton of it, and it has a bunch of different flavors. And the Steelers are in a unique spot where they really need a guy that can just win at all three spots. They need a guy that can play X, Z, and Y. They need a slot. They need a guy that can play outside at both spots. That was what CeeDee Lamb was in Mike McCarthy's scheme. That's what Jordy Nelson was. That's what Greg Jennings was. That's what all of these guys were. And so if they can find a guy like that, and that's really what they need, because DK I don't think is going to be that guy. Even though DK I think he's very talented in what the role he's going to be, it's going to be very important. They need a guy that can really open up the offense in some ways to just say, hey, we need to put you here. You can run that route. You're going to get open. We can make you a clear part of the progression, whether that comes through the draft or free agency is to be seen. But that is a very important part of Mike McCarthy's offense that they need.
I agree, especially with the uses of 11 personnel I see coming up that's going to be used a lot more often. They're going to need guys to fit that. Nick, before we go, I want to also address the linebacker position. I think we had a great discussions on D tackle and wide receiver. We also got to talk to the off-ball linebacker class today. What was your impression of players you talked to? And did you get a sense that the Steelers are going to be taking a close look at this group? Because I think there's some good depth at inside linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, we foremost with C.J. Allen, Anthony Hill, Jack Goldie. So a few different guys there. To me, this is the most under-talked about need that they have because, listen, what happens with PQ? I mean, it certainly sounds like PQ's on his way back, but I don't think he's going to get extended. I don't think anyone expects that. So he's in the last year of his deal. I don't think Peyton Wilson's year 2 was the expectation people had. He was losing snaps to Malik Harrison. And Malik Harrison was to put it as best as I can. And so I really think linebacker is a space where, man, they need a green dot. Like, they need a dude that can be your green dot 3-down linebacker, and it is a phenomenal inside linebacker class. And so they don't have to take one in the first round. And I frankly think CJ Allen's a reach at 21. So I like it, but I'm not sure I'd take him at 21. But there's a bunch of other guys, that are good. Like, I like Jacob Rodriguez. I like Jack Goldie. I like Keyshawn Elliott. I like Josiah Trotter. And all those guys I just named, totally different from each other, right?
Right.
Trotter's a real big downhill thumper. Elliott's kind of a true, almost a throwback in a little bit of a way. I got major leadership vibes from Keyshawn Elliott. I talked to him today because I love his tape when I watched it at Arizona State. And I just think he's one of the more underrated players in this entire class. He's a really fun player. And there's a really strong group of inside linebackers that you can use one of those third-round picks on one and say, hey, man, you can get a starter out of that crop, and you can feel good about it. And so I do think inside linebacker is a need. Is it a first-round need? I think that they're probably going to look as much as they can at the class, but I feel like that's a mid-round need personally. But they need a guy there, man. I think they do. And so that's drafting for the future. And that's, maybe Peyton Wilson, the light goes on and boom, you have a duo, right? I mean, that's kind of the ideal outcome, but I don't think you can really mortgage much of the future in terms of, putting so much into inside linebacker. I feel like personally, inside linebacker at this point, how valuable would it be to the defense? How important would it be compared to, say, even guard? I mean, would you rather take CJ Allen or Venga Ioane? I mean, I'd rather take Ioane, right? Like, I'd rather get another 10-year starter on the O-line, right, and fortify that. And so, yeah, I like the inside linebacker class. It's just, I also think first round's a little bit of a weird vacuum gap in value. And I think there's so many good players later down the board that are going to be starters. And I'm not just talking about, depth pieces here. Like, these guys are going to start in this league that I think that they can find a real body there.
I think that's a good point by you, especially because, Daniel Jeremiah, one thing he said last week when people talked to him was that, he thinks a lot of teams will want to trade down in this draft class to try to maximize the day 2 value. And so, maybe that's the plan with linebacker for the Steelers, but lots of different things happen in there. I do think the Steelers are looking at linebackers. They're definitely looking at D tackle. We can't wait to get to the receivers because we want to see which receivers the Steelers have definitely looked at. Lots of stuff there. Nick, you broke down there. They're looking at D'Angelo Pons, Indiana cornerback for Penn Live. So go read that story there because that's another player that they could be looking at here. It goes more towards what Daniel Jeremiah said. Is like they've invested in the trenches. It's time to get the outside the numbers playmakers on either side of the ball. So a lot to discuss with how the Steelers are putting together their early draft strategy and their combine interviews. So we'll keep an eye on how that develops. We're still here throughout the week, so stay tuned for that. Nick, thanks for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Farabaugh. Make sure to check out the Steelers stuff at PennLive.com/Steelers, and make sure to check out my YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz on Penn Live.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, wherever you get social media. My handle's always at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers. We're back here tomorrow with another episode right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.